Welcome to the SDA Housing Podcast, brought to you by NDIS Property Australia. Before starting this episode, we need to provide a general disclaimer. Information contained in this podcast is general in nature only. It does not take into account the objectives, financial situation, or needs of any particular person. You need to consider your financial situation and needs before making any decisions based on the information in this podcast. And you should consider seeking independent and professional advice for your personal circumstances. All right, let's begin.
Hello, everybody. My name is Debbie from NDIS Property Australia, and you're listening to the SDA Housing Podcast, a show that explains, highlights, guides, and brings awareness about all things SDA in this ever-changing NDIS world. We have a couple of special guest speakers with us today. I'm very excited to introduce Jonathon and Kevin from Paramount Homes. Hi, guys.
Hi, Debbie.
Hey, Debbie.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, lovely to have you. You've actually come up to Brisbane to visit us for a few days. So welcome to Brisbane, and you've brought the heat with you? No, actually, I don't think you did bring it from Melbourne.
No, it was 40 degrees in Melbourne today. But
Seriously? Okay, well, maybe you did send a bit our way because it's a lovely, warm, balmy day here as well, but certainly not 40 degrees. But yeah, we've put on the weather for you, for sure. So today, I had a few questions. I just wanted to ask you a little bit about what you guys do, get some opinions on various aspects of SDA, and just have a little bit of a conversation about
Victoria
the
market.
space and the Victorian market specifically. Yeah. So, firstly, can you tell us about Paramount Homes?
cool, yeah. So me and Jonathan, so my name's Kevin. Nice to meet you all. We started Paramount around 2 years ago.
And sorry, I should say Paramount Disability
Paramount
Homes.
Disability Homes,
Yeah,
correct.
get it
So
right.
that's our actual name. And we've been in the SDA space for almost 2 years. Paramount, what we mainly do is, so we're an SDA provider, and we mainly do homes. So we do the procurement process, find tenants for homes, and then manage the ongoing lease. And as Debbie says, the ever-changing NDI space, we've seen, major changes every 3 months. So, currently there's a lot of homes being built in the greenfield estates. So we're, doing a lot of work in those greenfield areas. And we've, had a lot of observations, which we'll probably talk about in this podcast.
Fantastic. All right. Now, what or who is Vital Haus? Spelt Vitalhaus.
Yes, a little bit of a different spelling, a bit of a point of a difference. So, yeah, Vital Haus will be a branch from Paramount. So it'll be an SDA provider as well. But with that business, we will be specifically tackling apartment projects. So the reason why we've chosen to split off the two companies is because the procurement process is completely different. It's a different product. The way we work with the care providers, so the SIL providers on the site, it's a complete different model. So that's why we've decided to split it up. And Vital will be launching in December this year, which will be very exciting for us. And yeah, we've got a few projects coming along early next year, starting construction. That'll be very exciting.
Brilliant. So I like that you're separating the two, because you're right. It's a very different product. A house, villa, apartment, they all take completely different, I'd imagine. Obviously, we don't deal with the SDA management side nor the care provider side, but they're very different animals.
Oh, yeah.
So interesting that you've chosen to do that. I think it's a great idea. Now, obviously, you're based in the Melbourne market, and there's been a lot of talk recently about supply and demand, not just in Melbourne, but all over Australia. But we are doing a lot, and we have had a lot happening in Melbourne. So talk to us more about areas of SDA need, demand in Melbourne.
Yeah, sure. So SDA need in Melbourne, obviously Melbourne has unfolded very quickly with a lot of, investors coming along, especially in the greenfield estates, but still the major areas of SDA need. So there's still a lot of demand anywhere within, I would say, the 15K radius of Melbourne CBD. And there's still quite a lot of demand. We're finding, especially in the eastern region, in the northeast pocket. So for east, it stretches all the way to Lilydale, to the southeast, probably not past Dandenong. we're still seeing quite strong levels of demand. But obviously, there isn't too many SDAs being constructed in those areas just because of the cost of capital for land. So that's why we'll probably talk about apartments and the feasibility for apartments in those spaces, which probably normal investors won't be able to tackle.
Yeah, especially on the Lilydale train station line. There's a lot of demand there from Box Hill to Ringwood.
Cool. Okay, good to know. So on the other hand, where are the no-go zones?
Yeah, great
Where we
questions.
got all that oversupply happening.
Yeah, so look, honestly, right now there is a huge oversupply in most, if not all, of the greenfield estates. Look, Melbourne West, everyone is probably very familiar that is oversaturated. But, even areas like Geelong, so we've got a lot of development happening in Armstrong Creek, in the north. Probably Jonathon can speak about the north.
Yeah, so especially around the Beveridge area, there's been so much construction there where there was no health services within 15 to 20 minutes of Beveridge, which really isn't the best for all participants. The best, going back to SDA need, I'll give you an example of why a greenfield area is not the best. Because it is a new suburb and there's emerging amenities around, the Wi-Fi isn't the best, and participants have to travel to really far away amenities, and it's not the best option for them.
Just to add on to that, in areas of SDA need, so we'll see a lot of participants actually holding on to their SDA funding, especially in the inner regions of Melbourne. It's very hard to sort of convince them to move to outer areas or outer regions because they have to, first of all, reconnect some of the disability support services. They're very intertwined in that community that they're used to. So it's very hard to move them further out. And John has been one of the property managers at Paramount, and he, has done some inspections. Maybe you can tell them about the story in Cranbourne.
Yeah, so did an inspection last week with a pretty big SDA provider, just showing him the properties that we manage. And across the road was 3 SDA properties that were under different management. And I just had a chat with all the tenants there, and all of them want to move back to Frankston or Dandenong, where it's closer to shopping centres, closer to medical services. And in Cranbourne, the closest hospital is the Clyde Hospital, which is still 25 minutes away. So yeah, not the best place to live.
And also that that having their own space as well. So a lot of these homes, we see a lot of SDA participants actually wanting single occupancy now. So a lot of people, they may get the 3-to-1 funding, which the NDIS is approving, but they want that, privacy essentially in their own space. So that's why we are as well creating this new brand, Vital Haus. We do believe that, there will be the more popular model for SDA will probably be apartments in the next coming few years.
That leads me into my next question. What is your opinion on apartments? Obviously, it's going to be fairly positive because you've built a whole new brand around it.
Yeah, definitely. So apartments is, I guess, we've been predicting that it's going to be the future of SDA housing. I think apartments, especially if you're looking at, again, the cost of capital for land, it's very hard to, do a knockdown rebuild project. Even in far out east, especially in like the Maroondah area, you're looking at maybe paying over $1 million for land. So your mum and dad investors are not ever going to touch that product. It's too hard to plan for. So that really leaves you to only, the developers who are, either building an apartment project and they can incorporate, 10% SDA or like a full SDA dwelling within that 15K radius of Melbourne. So that there's a few probably extra points as well that why apartments are better for participants. So it allows them still to have that community feel because they're in a space with other disabled participants. They have their own private rooms. Exactly. So privacy, a lot of these apartment deals that we're, taking on, they're very spacious. So 2 bedrooms designed in the sense that, for one participant only, you can bring their family members, so this model, if it's done right, it will be a win-win for participants, for the SDA providers, SDA providers, and the investors as well.
And I hear what you're saying about a lot of participants saying they want to live on their own. And this goes back to information that we've known for a couple of years from Housing Hub surveys and searches on the Housing Hub website, which is the predominant housing rental portal online. And I think something like 43% of searches are for single dwellings, single resident dwellings. So we've been talking apartments, as you know, for 2-3 years now. And we do have a lot of stuff in our project pipeline in Melbourne, and totally agree that I think it is the future of SDA because greenfield is out, it's oversupplied. The inner mid-ring areas, it's just not feasible anymore to develop SDA because it's way too expensive, the land value. So apartments fits two things there. You can firstly afford as an investor, it's a much lower entry price. And secondly, there is a real demand. Even if participants haven't got that funding, they have the choice and control of where they want to live. And that's something I might also get your opinion on is, and I know it's not an easy thing to do for a participant to get their funding changed, but it's certainly not impossible. And I know that's something we've talked about before with you. So someone has house funding 1 to 3, they choose to move into an apartment, the apartment owner is willing to take them with that lower income initially. Tell us briefly about the process for a participant to change their funding to increase it.
Yeah, sure, definitely. So look, when we do our procurement process, as I said, it's very different to houses. So with these apartment deals, we'll be marketing the property probably 8 to 10 months beforehand, and we'd be doing a joint marketing venture with these SDA providers. As Debbie says, a lot of participants don't have apartment funding. A lot of them will have, villa funding, 3-to-1, house funding, whatever it is. So they may not have the right funding when they move in or, when they apply the expression of interest. But what we can do is apply for a change of circumstances. So why we start again very early on is because we want to get that change of circumstances, put in place before they move into the property. I think Jonathon can probably talk more about how the change of circumstances work.
Yeah. So we partner up with Housing Hub, the team that Clarissa heads, and she usually puts together a team that supports the participant through that journey. So they're starting with developing the housing plan, why they want to change to an apartment, and doing the specific OT checks as well. It's a pretty long process. And then they have to resubmit it back to the NDIS for that change.
And how often would participants either get that approval to change or be knocked back for that?
Yeah, good question. I think it really comes down to how well that change of circumstances is done. So, if you were to do it yourself or find, a random support coordinator to do it that doesn't understand, what's needed in the change of circumstances, probably won't be successful. And the other problem is that it takes a very long time for them the NDIS or NDIA, I should say, to come back with a result. So these participants could be waiting 3 to 6 months and not be approved for that apartment funding. So it's really important that anyone that expresses their interest, we would refer them to Team at Housing Hub and a specific person that is delegated to do these change of circumstances to ensure that we can get 80 or 90% success rate in these change of circumstances. Yeah.
And I'd imagine too that a big part of it is going to be proving why they should obviously have their funding increased. And a lot of that, I would imagine, would be around the fact that that is the location that participant wishes to live in, probably because that's where they've grown up, where their families are, where their supports are, and there are just no suitable property types that their funding is valid for, no houses or villas available.
Yeah.
Could that be one of the main reasons?
I think so, yeah, definitely. I think why a lot of people don't originally have the apartment funding is because I think people that get funded with apartment funding usually display strong needs of living independently. They really like that aspect. But again, the NDIA has to realize that in these inner suburban areas, there's not going to be any housing developments. So we're trying to push for, and I think as they see more and more people going for the change of circumstances, hopefully that process does become easier. They will approve that apartment funding.
Initially. Yeah, especially for people living in those areas.
Exactly, yeah. So I think they should definitely look at what's being built. You're not going to get...
Precisely, yeah. Yeah, supply and demand.
Supply
It
and
comes
demand,
down
yeah.
to the type of dwelling as well, yeah. So we touched on the SIL providers. Tell us, obviously you work very closely with a number of different SIL providers, some quite large organisations. In general, what's their feedback on SDA units?
Yeah, well, for SIL providers, I think, look, they are currently, most of them have their SIL homes. So they're delivering their SIL supports in, their SIL houses. But some of their participants that they've looked after have gotten that SDA funding. So that means that they've got an obligation to move these participants in the SDA space. In terms of SDA units, I think they, prefer, obviously, the areas that they operate in. So they won't necessarily, the bigger SIL providers won't necessarily move out to greenfield estates because of staffing issue. If they've operated within 15 k's of radius of Melbourne, they're probably wanting to stay there. They're not going to hire more staff to go further out. So only specific SIL providers can deliver those services in those out areas as well. They seem to like the manor homes. Some of them like the manor homes. Do you want to explain what a manor home is?
Yeah, so a manor home is essentially a small apartment complex under one roof, which from the outside kind of looks like a house. Yeah, so you might have 4 or 5 individual apartments in the building that all have their own private, entrance from a common area, and there's probably a smaller SIL unit also in the building, but it looks like a house. However, it is assessed by an SDA assessor and enrolled as apartments.
Yes, exactly. And for them as well, it's easier in terms of staffing because they can hold
economies of scale,
exactly. So for them, they really like that. With apartments, I think it all comes down to the feasibility. So with these SIL providers, they need a certain number of participants in there to sort of break even or make money. So they, won't take on apartment projects if they're not not in areas of high demand.
What about the different types of apartments? So obviously there are projects that are solely and wholly an SDA complex, or there are those that are salt and peppered through a larger development. Is there much of a difference between the two when it comes to the way SIL providers look at them?
Yeah, so look, we've had some SIL providers that definitely prefer the salt and pepper, but that's not what you're always going to get. I guess, it comes back down to choice and control, getting the participants in areas that, they can intertwine them with normal residents. So that's the appeal that they have for the salt and pepper model, where you've got normal residents mixed with the SDA. But again, the SDA will usually take up, 1 to 2 floors. It'll still be separated, but they do get to share like the amenities, so pools, whether it's a cinema room. So they do like that model. But again, that's not what they'll always get. With these, sole SDA apartments, so 100% SDA apartments, what we're trying to do with Vital Haus, and I get Jonathon to explain this, is to really bring in that community feel into this, and it's really, really important.
Yeah, so what Vital Haus would promote is that community engagement. So all of these apartments must have communal rooms, specific amenities just to engage everyone in the building. And we really want to enforce that community environment so everyone participants and everyone has choice and control.
Yeah, whilst they get their own privacy as well.
Yeah, 100%.
So obviously we know that the provision of SIL in an apartment complex, that on-site supports, the concierge model, there's been a lot of talk about that working, not working in the past. What challenges are you now seeing from SIL providers in providing that on-site supports?
Yeah, great question. So I think for SIL providers, look, you need, once you get the SDA apartment funding in the plan for a normal participant, there's an extra line item which is known as unplanned supports. So with these, SIL providers, for them to run the concierge model, they have to have, a staff on site that will deliver these unplanned supports for maybe around 16 hours a day or even more. And the task that they carry is essentially like if a participant needs anything that's unplanned, really. So, getting them up, helping them make a tea, or putting on their clothes. For them, they need a draw from this line item, which is around 77 grand. But again, they need around 6 to be in there.
6 workers,
6 participants to be
6
there.
participants
Correct.
to make the
model feasible.
model work.
And that's at a minimum. So again, that's why we do our procurement process in advance. So we get the right SDA funding. These participants make sure that they have that line item, and if they don't, we apply for it. So they still, again, can operate,
Can make it work.
can make it work essentially. Yeah. And again, for the apartment projects, participants will still have choice and control over who they choose as their plan support. So their one-to-one supports. Sometimes it will be the company operating the concierge. Sometimes it's not. And we still want to make sure that they have that choice and control.
Yeah. So I think for people listening to this, investors, if you're looking at buying an apartment and you're still not quite sure how that works, so a participant will have their own support staff who will be looking after them, whether it's 24/7 or whether it's, for a lesser number of hours in the day. And as Kevin just said, it can either be the company providing the on-site supports in the apartment complex, or they can still keep their own carers, but tap into those on-site supports if and as when needed.
Yeah, exactly. So it actually comes to a win-win situation for the participant and the providers. For example, if I'm a participant right now and I usually need 5 hours of one-to-one support, you may not be using that one-to-one support for that whole 5 hours, but you still be billed for that whole 5 hours. A lot of the unplanned stuff just, it comes at random times. So that's why it's really, really helpful to have that concierge or that OSS provider in there.
So there's always someone
there on site that can do these ad hoc tasks, and everyone contributes their portion from that line item to the on-site provider. And, if this model is set out and planned well, participants love it as well because they get the support they need at a lower cost. Yeah, so that's essentially the best way I can explain it.
Yeah, perfect. That's sort of all my questions that I wanted to ask you. Is there anything else you wanted to add? Think that we need to understand about the whole SDA provision in Melbourne, houses, apartments?
I think it will be, not too much. I think it'll be very exciting to see what will happen in the next year unfold in terms of more apartment projects and, these participants in these inner areas finally getting accommodation that's fit for them. And we're certainly excited about getting all these things right before we do kick off these projects.
Yeah.
100%.
Cool. Well, thank you so much to both of you, Kevin and Jonathan, for joining us today.
Thanks for having us.
Giving us a little bit of your insight into the Melbourne SDA market. And I'm sure that we will be speaking to you more
100%.
in the near future.
Hope so.
And working very closely with you. We're very excited.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Easy.
Okay. Thank you everyone for listening, and we'll see you next time.
We hope you enjoyed this episode. Please make sure you are subscribed and following us so you can keep in the loop with all of our upcoming episodes. We would really appreciate it if you could leave us a 5-star rating, a written review, and to share this podcast with those that could benefit. Until next time, catch you on the next episode.